Heyo, busy brain. Welcome to the Busy Brained Saint podcast, where faith meets focus. I'm Kamden, an expert ADHD coach, here to help you understand your mind with confidence. God knows your brain perfectly, so let's explore that divine design together and discover just how fulfilling your life can be, living with God and ADHD. Hello, you made it. I'm so happy that you are here. My brain is busy and my heart is full. Today's podcast episode is titled The Rejection Express: Why ADHD Makes Rejection Feel Devastating. Some of you have heard of this term RSD before. I know I've talked about it on this podcast before, and it stands for Rejection Sensitive Dysphoria or Sensitivity Dysphoria. And in the DSM-5, I believe it does touch on this idea of rejection sensitivity. But the RSD piece came from a different ADHD doctor, Dobson, I think is his last name. And he termed this based upon his observations, but I don't believe it was based upon anything that was clinical. However, if there is something that across the board has been relatable to my clientele over the years since 2019 working with them, is this idea of rejection sensitivity. And I know that I've brought it up on this podcast before. I can trace it all the way back to high school, and even before that into middle school. I have some early experiences with it. And it's essentially whenever you feel rejected, you feel left out, you feel isolated, you feel judged, that your body has a physical response that is unlike any other physical response. It, for me, feels like I've been punched in the gut. I've been choked around the throat. I have tingles going up and down my body. I have shooting electrical shots like that go from my shoulders to my heart and from my shoulders down to my fingertips. It feels nauseating. It feels dizzying. I feel like I can't keep my balance physically as well as mentally and emotionally. It completely is like this entirety of a tidal wave from the tips of my phalanges, top of my head, all the way down to my toes. And it is a full body response. I have talked on this podcast about a misunderstanding that happened when I bought something on Facebook Marketplace with a complete stranger that I never knew. And just his response and how I showed up caused this to trigger RSD or rejection sensitivity in me. When I was in middle school and my friend groups were changing, not being invited to people's birthday parties, which is hard for anyone, but it completely put me out and it caused a lot of tears in middle school. In high school, a teacher would would ask me to stop talking if maybe I was having a hyperactive talking day, which happened every so often. And it would just trigger automatic tears, automatic shame. It is like the deepest sense of shame that you have ever felt. Once again, from the tips of my head, the back of my eyes, down to my throat, everything just feels completely ashamed. And I wish that this is something that we could grow out of with ADHD. I'm going to share a very vulnerable experience with you, however, from this past week. And I hope that you stick around for the whole story because there is a lot of learning and a lot of growth that feels different now in my 40s than it did when I was 11 years old. And I don't know if my 11-year-old self needed to know this. I don't even think she had the capacity to know this in her brain and the development of the brain. But I'm so thankful to be 40 and to have learned enough about myself and about my nervous system so that when this event happened, I knew exactly how to take care of myself. And that's what we do in ADHD coaching. And that's what I try to introduce you to and help you with on my one-on-one mini sessions as well, is to help you understand better what is going on in your ADHD brain and in your body so that you can hold on to yourself better. That's why I've changed my program to be a lot longer, because the transformation starts with education, starts with those incredible 8 weeks of sessions and knowledge and understanding and getting into the psychology and of coaching as well as of ADHD. And then once we get there, we just get so thirsty and so hungry to improve our life. And I can't abandon you. And so I had to extend my program to be a full 6-month program, because just when we were starting to get a taste of where your life could go, it was time to say goodbye. And I don't want to do that anymore. So that's why I've extended now my coaching packages to being mostly 6 months. There's a few other exceptions for my teenage clients that might not be able to work for that long, depending on who they are, but for the general public. And it all starts on that mini session. So if you have been interested in understanding more about your rejection sensitivity and getting to know yourself a little bit better, the first step is to schedule a free mini session. Of course, there's never any pressure for you to continue to work with me, but just know from this end, from my end, the most important thing I could do for this community is to support you. And it is a pleasure to support you, whether that's for 20 to 30 minutes or whether that's over a 6 months period of time or longer. It is why I do what I do. So let's hop into this lovely experience. I went to a sales conference in San Diego last week by a well-known mentor and coach within the LDS community. And she is powerful. She is someone who, in all honesty, I have resisted receiving direct mentorship from because it seemed trendy. It seemed like everybody went there. And then once I was humbled and I was trying to look for mentors, I saw this person and what she has accomplished in her coaching business, how she has impacted thousands upon thousands of women and men and families within generations of people, from the young to the old, and how she has done that effectively. And I saw her and said, you know what? Why am I looking any further? There's a person right in front of me who can show me the way, because I care about my ADHD community and I care about people understanding things about themselves that they don't understand. And I'm not going to let my own pride, and this is how we are with ADHD, right? We want to be different. We want to be unique. I'm not going to let that get in the way of what my people need, what this community needs. And so one of the main reasons why I put out the beta program last spring, or just a few months back, was of course to refine this program. And man, has it been successful. It has taught me so much, so much. I didn't even think I could feel more confident about what I have to offer my clients. And after having done this, I'm so confident. Everybody needs to do this program if they can. It's been incredible to see the love and the compassion that people are now bringing onto themselves and not resisting, and how they're able to show up in their life more calm and show up more of themselves. They're not trying to pretend to be anyone else, and yet they're able to accomplish more. They're able to find greater happiness, greater peace, life satisfaction. They're able to see their life for what it is instead of what they think other people think it should be. And the confidence and the strength that they have developed to stand on their own 2 feet in that process is ridiculously inspiring and real. And so I went to the sales conference and I took the money that I got from the beta and I put it toward the sales conference, because sales is essentially helping people feel inspired to purchase, to move forward, doing something that they haven't fully caught the vision for yet. And as my coaching is growing, the vision is there, but I was noticing that how I spoke about the vision needed some coaching, needed some help. And so I poured my heart into this and met 35 or so incredible women and one amazing dude. And we supported each other all week. During lunch breaks, we were answering each other's questions and sharing perspectives and insights. And it became a really dynamic group of women. Just was able to meet people from all over the world and as well as in the States. Many were coaches, many were not. It was fantastic. This mentor broke down, I think it was 10 steps into 3 days from 9 to 5:30. And we just hopped into it. We had a couple 15-minute breaks and an hour and a half break for lunch, and everything else was just go. My brain was fried. I took so many notes that I've been just barely starting to comb through. And more than that, it was the energy of the people in the room, of all these incredible people that cared about their communities, that cared about their message. And you are probably one of those. You have a message, you have something that might seem significant to share with others or might seem insignificant, but you have a message that the world can benefit from. And in putting your heart out there with rejection sensitivity, we open up ourselves not only to the limbic brain that's interested in avoiding pain and seeking pleasure and using time efficiently, but also the wobbly nature of the ADHD brain that really struggles to regulate emotion. And when it comes to this emotion of rejection, there's something about that is triggering to the ADHD body. So we went through day 1 and day 2, and connections are being made, and we went to lunch and dinner with each other. And day 3 came, and we made it halfway through the day. We're coming back from a break, and coach asked to everyone in the room, all right, who wants to be on my podcast? And if you know me, I am a big vision board person. And for the last 2 years or so, I have had this particular coach's podcast on my vision board. And I kind of changed the title so that it said that I was a guest on their podcast. And so this is something I've been envisioning and thinking about and putting out into the universe and praying about and believing would happen someday. And that belief hasn't gone away. I still believe that it will still happen. And so when that question was posed, I stood up on my chair and I waved my hands, and I was nice and big. I was a true ADHDer in that moment. And I just need to put out there that a lot of the time when I'm doing development these days, I'm doing it among other ADHD coaches, and we get each other, we understand each other, we're trauma informed, we are gentle with each other because we don't feel a massive need to be triggering each other all the time. And this particular coach, I know that she doesn't have that same kind of background, though she is extremely heart-driven and cares about her people and has put so much time and energy into helping people. And I do trust her on a human-to-human basis. I think that she's a very good person, a very kind person, and personable. And that's why I was willing to do it, but not necessarily ADHD informed or trauma informed, though probably more trauma informed than some coaches. And that actually has little to do with this experience I'm about to tell you about. And more, I want to highlight that the ADHD body, because the coach that I wanted to hire for this particular job, I needed this coach to see me more than I could see myself, or more than my peers could see myself. And for whatever reason it is, a lot of people will come to me and approach me with questions, desires for mentorship, without me soliciting it. And I'm really thankful for that gift that I think God has given me, or that I've developed with God over time, because I really like people. And I truly do see, and I still have biases, right? I'm still trying to work through things, but I really do see all of us as God's kids. And if we are God's kids, then there's something I must learn from God's kids. And I do not do it perfectly, but I do feel like it is something, an awareness that has been opened to me. And so I raised my hand and she brought me up, and I needed the coach that would tell me the hard things. Now, if we rewind the tape, as soon as she posed that question, the Kamden self that had been looking at that vision board for the past 2 years and playing over and over again what that conversation might sound like, she showed up. But she was nothing like the Kamden that had been trained for the past 2.5 days on how to do sales. And when this coach showed up, she was asking for me to sell her using her sales strategy, which was very beautiful and very ethical and, in my opinion, very generous and kind. And it felt like pouring into someone. It felt like giving belief to someone that even if they chose to not purchase whatever it was I was selling, that they would get off the call feeling better about who they were, that they would feel more encouraged and they'd have some tools they could take away and X, Y, and Z. And so I showed up there not as that person who had been trained for 2.5 days, but I showed up as a former version of myself that had been through this conversation a million times, but not using the format that she was looking for. This wasn't just a conversation. This was to show that this was a learning moment, a training moment, right? So she asked one of us to come up. We're going to try and implement these strategies she was talking about, and then she would give us feedback. The feedback came, but it came really intensely because even while I was up there, she reminded me, she's like, hey, you didn't do step 1 and 2. What the heck? What are we even doing here? And I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, shoot. We're supposed to be doing her sales technique, not what I've been thinking about for the past 2 years. And it was the wildest thing because I could feel my limbic brain on fire. I even expressed that to the people in front of me in the classroom. I said, wow, I'm so nervous. I can't get my head on straight. I tried to kind of make it playful and fun, but I could feel my limbic brain searching the rest of my brain for any clues as to one thing that we had learned, and it was unavailable. It was very unavailable. I think I remember thinking, ask more questions, figure out what she's looking for, essentially. But even in my questions, I always ended up talking about my answers. And anyway, I could get into the weeds with this. But the more I spoke, the deeper I dug my hole. And she was making some comments saying, I'm really going easy on you. I'm helping you out a lot with all these reminders. And sure, she was. My brain was just totally not. If we would have reviewed those 8 steps briefly or had a picture of them ahead of time, I could have recalibrated my excitement to the sales, but it was just so completely offline. Maybe you've been here before. And so essentially I'm being judged for something I have a lot of pressure, right? Something I've been promising myself I'd say yes to for the past 2 years and envisioning. Of course I had to say yes. Of course I had to jump up on the seat because this is something you say yes to if it's something you've been believing in for 2 years. You got to seize the moment, right? And at the same time, the intensity of how much I wanted this did not match how I was showing up. And I remember glancing at the audience or the rest of the classroom, and they just had this sadness in their eyes, like that secondhand embarrassment. And when talking with some of the women afterward, they're like, I wish I could have been Jiminy Cricket on your shoulder and told you, even if Jiminy Cricket was there whispering in my ear, it wouldn't have mattered. Because at that point, my nervous system was so dysregulated. It was so on fire. The electrical shooting up and down my body was like a freight train that was unstoppable. And at one point, and this, I don't want this to come out sounding really bad, but at one point, my coach was talking about how if we come in thinking that we have the best offer, then we're gonna bulldoze them. Because what we really need to know is if this offer is for this person. And that's what makes us a good coach, is our listening, not in our talking. And I totally agree with that. And yet I couldn't access that. I wasn't well practiced enough. And so she was making this point of when we get up there and we think we know more than they do, they're like, forget it. I'm going to flip you the bird. And I don't care what you're selling now because you don't care to know me. And believe you me, that was not my intention in being up there. But her point, I don't think I will ever forget. One of the other women that wrote to me, she said, that is seared in my mind forever because I wasn't even up there. But just watching you up there, I couldn't regulate my own nervous system. And so it has seared in my mind that I have to care more about the people I want to serve first before they will ever care about me, right? And I knew that. I've heard that before. But it certainly was a whole different experience this time. And so there I was, completely blew it. It was so bad. It was terrible. It was not at all what she wanted. And here I am face to face with a mentor that I have admired for years. I finally took the leap to do a in-person event with, to get to know her a little bit more personally. And she's essentially just said, try again. This isn't going well. And right before she dismisses me to go sit down to bring up another person to try, she's giving this flip the bird analogy. So I have the middle finger in front of my face and I'm feeling massive rejection, humiliation, embarrassment, frustration for having an ADHD body who gets so excited that the excitement triggers dysregulation, that I care so much that I had the stupid vision board that I've been envisioning this moment for 2 years. And so that's why it was so weighty. And I'll say that the woman that went up after me, who did a phenomenal job, doesn't even have a podcast, right? And that's not a problem. It was just, even though it was nerve-wracking for her up there, there wasn't a whole lot on the line. And so even in moments that we care the most is sometimes when we come across the most weird, or we totally blow it because of this dysregulation of the nervous system. And thought work is really important. Coaching, what I mean is how I talk to myself in those moments proved to be very helpful. And I'll get into that here. And in addition to that, this overwhelming rejection sensitivity that was pumping through my body was a freight train that would not be stopped. So I went and sat down, and a sweet woman right in front of me said, "Hey, do you want a hand squeeze?" And she reached back to me and she squeezed my hand, and I just let her hold my hand for, I don't know if it was a half a minute or something, and told her thank you. And from that moment on, I was just weeping silently, somewhat silently. So tears were just coming out. My body was completely offline. I had the short breath cry moments. The chin was completely quivering. I had to do a lot of really deep breaths. It was pretty embarrassing to have to experience that level of rejection in front of people. But then it was compounded by them looking back at this 40-something-year-old woman, mom of 4, who's a professional in her business and who's been seen as a mentor this whole week. And now all of a sudden she can't even stop herself from crying. And what was really cool is that I have been working on differentiation. So Dr. Finlayson-Fife talks a lot about differentiation, essentially believing and understanding that my emotions and my emotional experience are mine to hold, are mine to experience for myself, and that they are not anyone else's responsibility to resolve. And this is where I want to give massive props to this coach, and massive props to myself. A former version of myself wouldn't have been able to stay in that room. But the version of myself that did stay and was willing to stay and still lock into the conversation found it within herself to open her phone and to press record on a voice memo while she continued to type up whatever actually did get into my brain, even in that nervous system, but understood that the limbic brain was still outruling the prefrontal cortex, the learning brain, and the application brain. And so I'd probably want to go back to that recording in order to hear what this mentor continued to teach. Because I was there, I paid the money to be there to learn from this person. Whether or not I was dysregulated or not was irrelevant to the purpose that I came for. And so some of you are thinking that to improve with ADHD is to get rid of rejection sensitivity. And I don't know if that's always the case. I will say that after doing EMDR therapy and other therapies, it has helped me process some of my past trauma so that my brain isn't so much into that post-traumatic stress response or that complex PTSD response. So it's not as intense. But still with this moment with rejection that is so common with ADHDers, I had to sit in rejection. I had to sit in humiliation and continue to learn. And that's how I knew I was growing. And to this coach's credit, she did not, I was praying she would not draw more attention to me, which, by the way, number one, thank you. But number two, to see someone you just coached from love feel such big emotions and to not believe that those emotions are yours to meddle with, yours to fix, but to believe that client that you just coached has the capability to hold themselves and to manage themselves and to be so focused on my job is to love them, to help them grow, to help them progress, because you have to trust that they are a developed person enough that they can see the full picture. And so I really appreciated that she would look me in the eyes, that she would speak to me directly, that sometimes she'd even inform me using my name based upon the experience that we had in order to validate with me as a person, but not necessarily to draw attention to the fact that I was having big emotions. It's like she trusted me to differentiate, to have my emotions enough, and saw that anything to soften that blow would be to lose the coaching moment. And so to manage one's ADHD in this moment is to be able to hold yourself and see the ADHD and almost put it on display for other people and not make it mean that you are any less than anyone else around you. I think there's a really important balance in all of this also when we're talking about it. And I think about when I was a young child, there was a woman in my stake who had a rare skin condition where she had just a ton of bumps. I don't know if they were boils or if they were what they were, but her whole body, her fingers, her hands looked extremely painful, were covered with bumps. And I remember as a child looking at that and feeling discomfort, not knowing what to do with my emotions. And yet she would come to church every week. She didn't wear any other clothes beside the same kind of clothes I was wearing. You couldn't really hide the fact that she had this particular disease or condition. And so she just showed up. And she showed up helpful, and she showed up for herself and for God. And she wasn't afraid to have to manage everyone else's emotions around the condition she had. And that's not like she was going up to people and putting her hands and her arms in people's faces and saying, you got to look at this intensely with force. But is that not what ADHD is? I have to live with this condition all the time. It doesn't mean I have to go put it into people's faces or become distracting. Not like I was just weeping and wailing in the back when this happened. And in fact, as soon as my coach said that we we're going to take a short break, I was out of there. And I locked myself in the bathroom and I let myself really unload and cry a little bit harder and move my body, regulate a little bit with movement. And I made sure that I kept track of time because it was a 15-minute break to make sure people came in and out of the bathroom as needed, because I didn't want to talk to anyone. I didn't need to be comforted. That hand squeeze was more like, hey, I'm proud of you. That was hard. I see you. I see what you just did there. But it wasn't to say, hey, Kamden, like you're not strong enough or something bad happened to you. It was to say, I'm with you in this. And I came out of the bathroom and there was an awesome couple, amazing people in there, and they were just encouraging. And one of them is also a neurodivergent coach, and I will be forever grateful for the words that she spit out of her mouth. She said, I was up there watching you and I couldn't even calm my own nervous system watching what was happening up there. So I can only imagine what you were feeling. And the biggest conclusion that I came to in that bathroom, and I knew, okay, this is what I'm going to say if anyone says anything, was really true, is that was super hard. It was really bad. Very dysregulated, but I would do it again. And that's the honest truth. I would do it again because I came there for someone who could see better than I could see, and that would hold me to a standard that wouldn't budge. And I needed that for this particular sector. Now, if I had to run my entire business that way, I would be in complete burnout. And my brain went to that as I was trying to regulate over the next 3 or 4 days. My brain went to that. It was like, how am I ever going to jump back into this business if this is what it's going to take to help me hit my goals or for me to continue to grow and continue to have more impact? That's where our brain does. It catastrophizes. But to know that the neurodivergent experience is real, I just really appreciated that was another neurodivergent coach. That experience is real. It wasn't something I was making up. It wasn't just because I was a weak and overly sensitive person, though there are people that are highly sensitive, right? But that this was a condition that I have to live with, and that it wasn't going to get in the way of what my goals were. But I also wasn't going to pretend that it didn't exist. So to go take 15 minutes in the bathroom by myself, to help myself regulate, to sneak out before anyone had a chance to come up to me, to come back in as things were just getting started again, is to set a boundary, is to know what to ask, how to ask for what I need, is to not place the blame outside of myself, but to take full ownership of the experience that I have as a person, is to not require something else of someone else, but to set the boundary, meaning if this happens, then this is what I will do. And it was huge. So I'm going to still take you through a few more things because rejection sensitivity is more than just the moment, right? I told you it took me days until I finally felt regulated. So the school ended, the 3 days ended, and I made a decision. They were so sweet. The other women, they were all staying in the same hotel. I was staying with my parents. It was good. I hadn't seen them in about 8 months. And they said, come out to dinner with us. We're going to meet in the hotel at such and such hour. And so while I was making myself there, I was still trying to regulate, still talking to people, trying to not bring too much attention to myself, but very much my nervous system was still buzzing, 120% buzzing. It had been like an hour and a half now by this point, but it was still, I described it to my husband as, imagine you were in a very serious car accident, like really scary. Like the car, the airbags went off, your car spun around, it's completely totaled. Imagine that's what we feel like inside of our body without all the physical bumps and bruises and cuts that would happen in a car wreck. Okay. That's what our nervous system feels like. And then to go and say, okay, let's go out to dinner. Or, hey, can I ask you a couple questions about your business? Or, hey, what's your biggest takeaways from today after having such a severe and intense and traumatic thing happen to your body? And it feels similar. It's just, that's all I can say is there's not any rewinding the clock. There's not any convincing yourself that if you could just say the right thing or do the right thing, that your body wouldn't be feeling the way it was. In fact, if I got in a car wreck, what would you say to me? You would say, whoa, go lay down, go take a couple days off. You've been through a ton right now, right? But because our condition is internal, people don't understand that. So I told them I'm going to try and figure out what I'm going to do next, but I'll be there at 5:30 if I'm coming. And all the while, I'm talking to myself and evaluating what's really happening. Then I get to talk to a couple more people and say goodbye and nice to meet you, and just some amazing humans. And really kind sentiments were extended toward me from the people that were there that I could tell were very mature and really informed people. Once again, they weren't afraid of my big emotions, or they were oblivious to them, I don't know. And they took the time to present outreach without being intrusive to my experience. And I'm really thankful for that as well. So I eventually did. I said, we're just going to go to the hotel. We don't have to go out to dinner, but we're going to show up. And one of my biggest takeaways, having experienced so much rejection sensitivity in my life, is something actually that I learned from the same mentor, is that when you're battling this motivational triad of either avoiding pain, seeking pleasure, that every time you try to overcome this or override this triad, it's going to be really uncomfortable. And so you can either do it now or you can put it off and do it later. But when you do it later, you bring all the guilt and the shame and the frustration and the annoyance with you for that whole time. And then you still have to overcome the negative emotion. So sometimes it's okay. I call that intentional procrastination. Sometimes you do need to set the time out, but I knew the conference was done. And I wanted to put it to a test. So I said, all you have to do is go to the hotel and be there. Because otherwise you're going to continue to spiral. And this is going to be your last memory of this conference. And this conference was so much more than those 5 minutes of you up on the stage that have become this completely overwhelming experience. So I went into the lobby, and one by one, the women came out. And some of them, I could tell, didn't understand what I had just experienced. And honestly, that felt sad to me, because some of these women I had really connected with on day 1, day 2, and I could sense discomfort from them after this had happened. And I can get into their minds as much and think about what that might be, but all I'm going to say is that there was an observation. And maybe they didn't know what to say. Maybe they thought I was still being strong and it wasn't as big. Maybe they thought I was being weak and a baby about it. I don't know what it was, but it was less important what they thought of me and more important that I show up for me. And in doing that, I still got to observe and participate in the conversation and have some smiles and get to know some of the women that were more willing to converse. And it was well worth it. So from that point, they chose a restaurant. And so I decided to drive over there, and I sat in the parking lot as they were walking from the hotel to the restaurant. And once again, I am just crying and fighting back tears, and very easily could get into the spiral of really crying hard, because once again, I was just in the car accident, right? That's what my body feels like. And it was scary, and I haven't fully processed it yet. But I know I wasn't in the car accident. And so on one hand, once again, it's how do I take care of my nervous system? But then how do I still keep my eye on the prize? And the idea that I landed on once again before I went into the restaurant was, okay, I have an opportunity to show myself that my ADHD doesn't have to be in the driver's seat here. And I'm curious how far we can take this. It was more of this very unwelcomed science experiment. And I thought, okay, if I go in and I order my food first, and I need to leave first, at least I get to determine when that's going to happen. And I don't have to be super happy. I don't have to socialize. I'm just going to get in there, get my food, sit down, and then they can come to me, essentially, and we can eat together, and then I can excuse myself as needed. So one of the women there, once we all got our food, she was asking about what we all learned at the conference, what were our greatest takeaways. And the night before, she had mentioned that she would like to go out and hang out with me because we're, really alike. There was a lot of mutual interest in our businesses and our personalities. And so she leaned over and said, Kamden, what were some of you? She said, you're a little bit further than a lot of us in our business, but what were some of your main takeaways from this conference? And it would have been really easy for me to just kind of spit off 2 or 3 things, but I was not in the mentorship state of mind, right? I was not in that, I wasn't in the masking state of mind. I was in the middle of the experiment. And so even though it was super awkward, and I even heard myself judging myself saying, why are you making this all about you? Why do you have to make everything about ADHD? I could hear myself judging myself, and I just decided to not listen to that voice. And even now it's like, I can hear that voice. And we do this to ourselves, especially when we're down, is that we start to be really critical toward ourselves. And it's not that once you start to be a coach or start to embrace coaching, that the negative narratives go away. It's that you see them and you notice them as a human part of your existence, but you no longer let them win. You no longer give them the attention. You no longer bend at their request. And so I said, let me just give you a little bit of education right now. You guys know I'm an ADHD coach, and you saw what happened up there on the stage. And there's something called rejection sensitivity dysphoria, or rejection sensitivity. And I don't know if any of you have heard of that before. And I was shocked to learn that none of them had heard of it before. And so I encouraged them to go read an article or 2 about RSD. And then I proceeded, maybe for 4 minutes or so, to inform them about the experience of someone who has rejection sensitivity dysphoria, or sensitive dysphoria. I always get the ending wrong, but you guys know that by now. Precision of language is not my forte. And that, number 1, felt a little bit isolating, but also I felt really thankful and willing that I got to share with 8 other women about an experience that 1 in 10 people have, if we're looking at a lot of the statistics of ADHDers out there, right? And I'm like, so when your loved one with ADHD is experiencing this, it is something really intense. And so then I just stopped talking for a second. It felt like a lifetime. But one of the other women at that point said, so what you're saying is probably answering that question right now isn't what you're prepared to do, or not something that you feel like you can do right now. And I said, actually, I can't remember, but essentially, no, I can share with you, I think, one of my biggest takeaways, but it's just really important for you all to understand that this isn't something I'm choosing. I'm not wallowing. I'm not trying to, but I'm still having to manage a body that is completely offline and buzzing. And it feels like electricity is going from my head to my toes while we're sitting here. And it looks like I'm just here at the table, just like the rest of you, but inside it's a complete attack on my nervous system. And I forgot that when I was in the car, I was going to get into the restaurant. The thing that actually did get me out of the seat, yes, were the other things that I mentioned. But the biggest takeaway was that I said, you deserve to have a good meal. Because when I experience rejection sensitive dysphoria, my appetite goes out the window. And a lot of my breakups with my former boyfriends, ex-boyfriends, ended in me losing a lot of weight because I didn't know how to talk with my brain and my body that didn't feel like eating to say, you deserve nutrition. You deserve to eat a good meal, even if you don't feel like you want to eat one. And so that's actually the thing. I just remembered that got me into the restaurant. In addition to all the other safeguards and procedures that I put out there to help myself. Dinner ended. I stayed the whole time. It was really good to be with other people. It was good to not stay in that dark place. It was good to be surrounded by other entrepreneurs and other coaches. And it felt supportive to the kind of person I'm working on being. It did. It really did. And I couldn't do that every day. I wouldn't even choose to do that every day. But because this was such a special occasion, I was so clear on what my intentions and my goals were, it made it easier to exercise my agency that way. Also, I didn't have my kids with me. I didn't have my husband with me. I didn't have anyone to get back to. So 100% of my efforts could go into taking care of myself. And that is very rare these days. And I learned that about myself too, is just how spread thin we are as moms and mompreneurs or whatever, that it's no wonder that we can't find the capacity. I also remembered on this trip that I'm a really nice person. And not that nice is something we're always shooting for, but raising teenagers, neurodivergent tweens, feeling like I'm failing a lot in life, knowing I'm not, but feeling that way. And then to be around a whole bunch of people that know how to take care of themselves is like, wow, I really am a kind person. And I really do love people, truly, deeply. I have such love for people. And that was so refreshing. There's just been so many things that have come from this experience. And lastly of all, and I'll stop it here, though there has been a lot of other takeaways, is that at the end of that meeting, one of the women asked me to stay behind and if she could ask me some questions. And I don't want to give too much away and keep her story private, but it was in my sharing about rejection that she started to wonder if one of her loved ones has ADHD and has been experiencing rejection similar to ADHDers. And that turned into an 1.5-hour, 2-hour conversation. And toward the end of the night, her sentence to me, and I'm not going to get it perfect, essentially was, today you had to feel rejected in front of that classroom and in front of our coach. You had to do that so that I would know how to help my loved one. And so that you could help me understand my life more clearly. And I really thought, as I was talking with my mom and dad when I got home, which, by the way, I completely broke down, and I let myself break down. As the oldest daughter, I didn't really let myself break down unless I just couldn't stop it. And so it felt so good to cry so unabashedly, so untethered with my parents, who I haven't ever lived around my parents as an adult. So that was another really special moment. My dad was sharing, he said, I know this might be obvious, but Christ was rejected not for things that not for anything that he did wrong. And he was a man acquainted with grief and sorrow. And he was humiliated in the most terrible of ways. And he mentioned hanging on a cross with nails without any clothing on. The Son of God, humiliated. And of course, I don't understand everything about our Savior, but I do. There's got to be a level of learning. The scriptures say that he did. He learned wisdom and line upon line, and he grew. So there is some degree to growth of experiencing something mortal. But most of what he did, if not all of what he did, was not for himself, but it was for the benefit of other people. And that's why I was at this conference, Yes, of course, my business supports my family. Yes, of course, it's something that I love, and I feel if the whole world could love their profession as much as I love helping you all, it'd be a much happier world. So, of course, some of the consequences of this work impact me, thank goodness. And so much of the work that I do is going to be far more impactful on the world if I see it not about me. If I see me showing up and learning how to present to you all today on this podcast or on our mini sessions or on social media posts or my newsletters that come out weekly. If I can help you all in your life, that impact will be exponentially more powerful than anything that I could just do for myself. And I think about that, and the idea, and this is where I'll close today, the idea of, once again, that God doesn't always choose to give us pain, but God can take our pain and sanctify it and make it holy. And that's what I feel like he did. I have ADHD. God knows I have ADHD. God knows I'd probably stand up on that chair and wave my hands in the air because I have really good balance. I grew up skateboarding. He knew that I would do that. And I'm overly enthusiastic. God knew that I've been looking at my vision board. And he knew that when my coach called me up there, that I wouldn't be in my right mind. And he said, here it goes, right? And he didn't stop that from rolling forth, and he didn't create the pain, but man, has he sanctified it. And I think it has everything to do with us giving a willful heart. And when we are willing and humble and honest about clean pain, I think we allow more space for Christ to cover us and to comfort us and to come into our experience. And the gratitude that I feel, maybe not even today, but the gratitude I feel for knowing how pivotal this moment of rejection could potentially be, is greater than any money I could have spent on any program or any amount of days at a conference. But I had to allow God to sanctify that pain. And I had to see that my rejection sensitivity is not a reflection on who I am as a person, but instead is a teaching tool that reflects the lived experience of someone who has a brain like mine and a nervous system like mine, and our ability as humans to adapt and to grow and to learn and to put in the work so that I could share something like this with you today, to validate how difficult this is, and also to illustrate how far I have come because of everything that I teach in my programs, because of all of the mentors and coaches and podcasters and authors and doctors and psychologists and psychiatrists and researchers for all of the work they've put in so that I could be here in this moment speaking this to you. And that gift and that awareness is something that is worth waiting 43 years for. So today, my incredible busy-brained saints and friends, I offer a hand squeeze to you. And I remind you that you are so much greater than the vibrations and the electricity that might be flowing up and down your body that feels evolutionary, telling you to escape, to flee, to leave, to abandon. And I hold your hand and I give you a squeeze. And I remind you that you are so much more than what ADHD symptoms you experience. And, of course, that you have a God who understands and loves and pleads for your case, for your happiness, and for your growth. Please know how much I deeply love you, and I am always cheering you on. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Busy Brain Saint podcast. If you're eager to explore the world of ADHD coaching, make sure to connect with me on Instagram at Kamden_ADHD or visit my website, KamdenADHDcoaching.com. For more LDS-specific ADHD content, don't forget to follow this podcast and join us on Instagram at The Busy Brain Saint. Listen, I'm here to support you on your journey. I cannot wait to have you as a part of our community. Stay engaged, stay inspired, and remember, you're not alone here. Thanks for being a part of the Busy Brain Saint family.